Welcome to episode 85 of the Cycling Europe podcast. My name is Andrew Sykes. Now, there's been a pretty quick turnaround on this episode of the podcast. Normally at the end, I say if you've got a story that you'd like to share, or if you'd like to appear on the podcast, then get in contact by emailing podcast@cyclingeurope.org, and that's exactly what Johnny Murtagh did only a few days ago. And since I'm on holiday from work this week, it's half term at school, I invited him to record the interview that you're about to hear. And that's exactly what we did earlier today. So without further ado, I asked him to start by introducing himself.
My name's Johnny Murtagh. I completed the Camino de Santiago back in October 2023. So it took me about 35 days, and I did it by cycling. Normally traditionally people do it by walking and hiking, but I did it by a touring bike from Calais. I started in Ashford in Kent, and started cycling from Calais all the way through France and across the north of Spain to Santiago de Compostela, which is in the Galicia region of Spain.
Right. We were just saying before we started recording that normally when I do these recordings, I kind of know probably answers to most, if not all, of the questions before I start speaking to the person. But with you, I know very little indeed, and we haven't chatted much before starting recording. When you sent me your email, which I've got in front of me, you basically said what you've just said, and I thought, well, I don't think I've ever had anybody speak about the Camino de Santiago, but it is something that interests me because I've done a little bit of it, albeit in the opposite direction, but we'll perhaps talk about that later. When I Googled your name, Johnny Murtagh, I came up with an Irish jockey. You're not the Irish jockey, presumably.
No. He apparently is a distant relation. No, I'm not. I'm from London, but we do have Irish roots. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so there is a connection there, but you're not him.
No.
And the,
No.
the other thing I've got, you sent a photograph because in your email you mentioned about meeting an interesting bunch of people in the final week of the cycle, and we'll get to that obviously when we get to the end of your journey. But they look an interesting bunch. I've got that photograph in front of me, and I've got you don't really have much of an online presence.
No.
As far as I know, you don't have a website or anything like that, but you do have an Instagram account. And again, that's what I've got in front of me as well. So before we talk about the Camino de Santiago, cycling, have you always been a cyclist, or was this a kind of a first foray into long distance cycling?
Yeah, I think I can officially say I'm a cyclist now. I think I've always had a bike for practical reasons. I've always seemed to have cycled to work if it was feasible. Touring, I sort of took up about maybe 10 years ago. I went to Paris and was meant to go with a friend, and he couldn't make it, so I went on my own. And it was with a basic hybrid, but that kind of really opened my eyes of how much fun touring can be, how much independence you get. You can stop when you like, look at churches, which is what I was kind of interested in, the sightseeing side of things, and camping, and got the Eurostar back. I just was a bit of a revelation. So after that point, I did a few other tours in, say, Mull, Iona, and then I did the Scottish borders, and then I've done it with dragged a few friends in who reluctantly didn't want to do it, but we did it in sort of Tuscany. And since then I've done, I guess, sort of 5-6 days holidays with friends or in a group where we've had one base and we just cycle every day, say for example Lucca or Lake Annecy in France. And so yeah, it's touring is kind of, I guess, a part of my life now. Just it's a really cool way of seeing a country and experiencing things. And it's a bit hard work at times, but I think, no input, no output. So yeah, I'd say I'm officially a touring cyclist up to this point.
And you're pretty well located. You live down in Kent, don't you? So you're obviously near the ports to get down to or onto the continent. And it's interesting that you mentioned going to Scotland. I've done quite a bit of cycling in Scotland, and I was there earlier this year. But actually, I'm always a bit envious because I once, a few years ago, when I lived down in Reading, I took the sleeper train from Euston up to Scotland, and it was an amazing experience. Um, and I always think, God, that's one thing because I think you can get on the sleeper at Preston and then go further north. But it seems as though you're going to kind of miss out on all the fun of being in the dining carriage in the late evening and what have you. Just kind of get on and get on into your bed. Whereas if you come from the south of England, you can always jump on that sleeper train. Have you ever taken it?
Not take. I've No, I've not taken a sleeper train with. Well, I've only done it in say Thailand, but not with a bicycle. Um, I have taken the bike on the train, so I've just remembered I did a South of France tour, which was Avignon, Arles for about a week. And I think what's always been attractive to me is being able to get back. So it's not just a circular trip. You can get back by train. So I took the Eurostar back from Avignon when Eurostar was stopping there. They've also closed that service as well, and that was really cool to be able to take your bike down somewhere and come back. So I flew there first and then came back. But no, I haven't taken a sleeper train. But yeah, Scotland is fantastic when you get the weather, and it's like a different. Well, it is a different country, but it looks really different when the weather is cracking. Those sort of beaches. I remember actually quite a distinctive trip on. I think it was Mull where they have. I think it's there's an amazing beach there, which I think one of the capitals of the province in Alberta in Canada is named after. I think it's either Calgary uh, beach, and it's named after that beach because and it was just beautiful alcove blue water. It was like the Mediterranean or Greek island somewhere. It was fantastic, and then you've got your bike there, so you sort of camp up. And in fact, actually, from that trip, seem to remember I bumped into someone who was camping next to me, and it was a very young German woman. She had a dog in a rear trailer, and was just cycling around the Scottish Islands. And I just thought, yeah, that's an amazing place to go to cycle. And yeah, it's an inspiring place to go to, I think, for touring.
Yeah, absolutely. And but you're right about the weather. Obviously, if it's um, yeah, I've had some fantastic weather, but I've also had some bloody awful weather, and it's the kind of place where the weather is all important, isn't it? But anyway, a bit of a diversion. Let's get back to last year. Now I'm just looking at one of your pictures. You're standing outside Amiens Cathedral, and the reason why I'm looking at it because I can kind of see the bike. What kind of bike have you got there?
It's a steel Genesis Tour de Fer 20. So Genesis is obviously, I think it's a Yorkshire um, cycle manufacturer. Um, I think it is anyway, at least. And so yeah, it was a kind of size small, which is probably not quite the right size. I should probably have gone with a medium, but I don't think they do frame sizes. Well, they didn't for that model. Yeah, bought it off eBay off a chap who was an electrician in London, South African, and he was selling it because he had his boat in Mexico. He had a yacht, and it was being moored there during COVID years, and he was selling his bike, and he really looked after it, and I got a bit of a steal, excuse the pun, but yeah, it's been yeah, I think it's my first steel bike. I've had a specialized sort of a maybe a kind of steel gravel bike, but in the past. But yeah, incredible handling. It's one of those bikes. The more weight you put on it, the more stable it seems. I don't. Maybe that's a particular thing that happens with touring bikes. It becomes very steady, like a ocean liner. You don't feel like it's anything is going to happen to it, even if you went down a steep hill at sort of 24 miles an hour. You think, yeah, this has got good handling, and it had a dynamo light both front and back, which was really good for me. Great pannier racks already on there, and it had cool options like spokes had like spare spokes built into the frame if you wanted to use them. Thank God I didn't need to, because I think that was going beyond my mechanical knowledge. Although there's always YouTube, I suppose. But yeah, fantastic bike.
Yeah, the spokes thing is interesting because one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from, because my technical knowledge is still hopeless, and I wouldn't know where to start with a spoke. But the important thing about carrying spokes is that you can then go to a shop and you've got the right size spoke. Because I always dismissed the idea of taking spokes with me, thinking, well, what's the point? I don't know. I can't fit the things, so I'd just have to take it somewhere. And then I was told that there are so many different sizes, so at least you can present the mechanic who does know what to do in the bike shop, or somebody who's accommodating you, for example, I don't know, warm showers person, and they might be able to do it. And the other, you mentioned it's a steel one, that always makes me smile, because I was my first touring bike, the Ridgeback Panorama, was a steel one, and there's that. You're told that it's always a good idea to buy a steel touring bike if you're going a long distance ride, because if it breaks, then you can find somebody to weld it back together. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if this bike breaks to such an extent I've got to go and find somebody to weld it back together, I'm just getting on the next flight home. I'm not continuing my journey with a steel frame bike. But anyway, it's never happened, thank God.
Yeah.
And I suppose I mean, if you took a carbon bike, then that would be catastrophic, wouldn't it? If it just kind of snapped. But anyway, we digress. So what was the motivation for doing the Camino de Santiago? Are you a religious person? You mentioned churches before.
No, I was brought up Roman Catholic, but no, I wouldn't describe myself as religious, but I do like a good church, as they say. And I guess the motivation, I was on a work sabbatical. I took a work sabbatical, and I thought, right, I need to fill this up with uh, stuff to do. And I just thought to myself, what do I really like? What do I really like doing? I've got all this time. Um, so I just said, right, I'll do a long distance tour, and I didn't really have any idea, and I just thought, well, Santiago, it's got to be that. It's one of those places that a lot of people are going to now. It's really picked up in popularity for walkers in the last, say, 20 years or so. I've met people around the world who I've met one guy, he had a conch shell, which is the sort of symbol of St. James. Um, and when you're a pilgrim or a peregrino, you kind of wear a shell, a conch shell, to let people know, or a badge that you are very similar to. So Canterbury, you'd wear, you know, a, a sort of statue of St. Thomas a Becket, or a symbol of him. And I met people with tattoos on their calf muscles and stuff. It's a really big thing. So I thought, right, I really want to do a long distance tour. I want to I maybe hit some churches and famous cathedrals in France, and yeah, just thought, right, it's a decent enough distance. Um, it wasn't something that was, you know, maybe too easy. I thought it would be a challenge for me, the topography and the time of year as well. I thought would be good. So maybe September, October, out of the sort of peak tourist season. But no, not a religious reason. But I do know a lot about, sort of. I'm quite interested in medieval history and things like that. So I was quite interested in that part of. I'd read a fair few books on, say, Christian Spain and all the different kingdoms that are there. It's it's only relatively recent it's been united as one kingdom, so it's quite an interesting part of Europe where there's lots of crossovers and stuff. So yeah, and I thought it's got really good infrastructure for as part of the Spanish leg, the Via de Frances. Um, there's a couple of other routes that go through Spain, and they just have lots of albergos and hostels, and they're really cheap and set up for pilgrims really. So I thought that would be a really good experience to try and do that rather than walking it.
Mm. Well, just as a matter of interest, what do you do for a living?
I'm a librarian, so maybe obscure sort of interests such as like Christine Kingdoms of Spain. But yeah, so it was something that I've kind of been interested in going to the northern bits of Spain. Are always quite interesting because you think Spain, and the first thing that comes into your head, I guess, is Costa del Sol, sort of villas and stuff, and Barcelona and tapas. But the northern part is really verdant and quite different, and obviously just a couple of different languages there. A part of the world, Basque, Asturian, I think, and Galician. So it's quite an interesting part of Europe and an interesting part of Spain as well.
And you said you had a sabbatical. How long was the sabbatical that you took?
1 year, yeah. So it was I took the maximum that I was allowed to, and I was incredibly lucky and grateful to be able to do that. Just to have a career sort of break, just to say, right, I'm going to have a rest and think, and have some time off, spend time with family, etc. So I thought, right, I'm just going to try and just think of stuff you wouldn't be able to do even with like 3 or 4 weeks of annual leave. Just try and do something that you've not been made redundant, or you've been let go, or you
Yeah.
take an early retirement or something. So
And was there a deadline that you needed to meet? Were you going back to work in, I don't know, the October time when you came back, or?
no, I literally started the Camino. I sort of left my house, and I'd finished maybe about 4 days before I finished work. It was a mad rush of trying to arrange tenants to take my house and pack up everything securely in my own attic, and then clear the house, get it all completely clean, but also packing at the same time for maybe a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and packing for all weathers, which is always difficult. Um, yeah, it was. I actually missed my. It was such actually stupidly early ferry crossing. I missed the train. The train station's not very far from me in Ashford, but I missed it, and I missed the ferry crossing because I was, even on the train, I was um, looking around for my passport. I thought I'd left my passport, but I had so much stuff in bags and all the rest of it. It was a bit of a mad rush, but it was memorable, I suppose. You don't want it to be something that's too easy and just like, yes, I went A to B, and the weather was nice and the food was nice. Nothing uneventful happened, But yeah, it was a bit of a mad start, and I thought at some point on that train, what am I doing?
But at the other end, when I'm assuming here that you had no rush to get to Santiago by a particular point. You could just kind of, take your time. Is that right? You had nothing to come back for immediately.
No, although I know the weather in Galicia is quite rainy and can really bucket it down towards, well, it can do that any time, but in September, because it's right next to the Atlantic, the Bay of Biscay, so it just gets walloped with the Atlantic
Mm.
um, systems coming over. So I was intending to go all the way down to Lisbon or maybe to Seville, actually. But by the time I sort of arrived, it was really bucketing down in Galicia. It was, we had about three days of just chucking it down in the rain, and it was, well, some people are fine with literally taking a human shower every day for about 5 hours a day, but it does take its toll, and there's no such thing as waterproofs in those sorts of conditions.
Yeah. Now the route that you took, I think when most people think of the Camino de Santiago, they think of the bit in Spain itself, the bit in northern Spain, the Camino Frances, the French Camino, which starts officially in Saint Jean Pied de Port and then finishes obviously in Santiago de Compostela. But if you look at a map of all the different pilgrimage routes, they all kind of fan out across Europe. And I've frequently come into contact with the shells, not just in northern Spain, but for example, when I was in Chartres a couple of years ago, there were signs for the Camino there, the shellfish sign. Um, and even if you go up to Trondheim, up in Norway, that's the end of the Eurovelo 3, which is called the Pilgrim's Route in reference to the Camino de Santiago, which it follows as far as Santiago de Compostela. So you presumably picked up the route in Calais. What was the route that you followed through France, and were you following one of the official routes to the Spanish border?
No, I didn't take an official route. My route was through France. I wanted to see the grand cathedrals of northern France, Amiens, Chartres. I wanted to go to Paris, um, and I wanted to see the Loire Valley with the chateau. So I followed the Loire Valley, which was amazing. I think you might have done bits of it in the past. I think I recall hearing from one of your podcasts. Yeah, it's flat, it's beautiful, awesome campsites, loads of stuff to see, and yeah. So I didn't follow. I think part of the reason is there's not. You can follow the routes through France to Santiago, but they just won't have the same infrastructure as Spain. They won't necessarily have hostels for pilgrims. They may not be open all year round. They certainly aren't open all year round in certain parts of the Spanish routes. Um, so you might see them signposted, especially for walkers, but you might have to just find your own accommodation and if you're camping, etc. It's very much a Spanish um, thing, I'd say. I mean, the shortest one in Spain is the Camino Inglés, I think it is, which is from the port, and it's that's I mean that's not very long at all. I'm just looking at the map now, my booklet. You get this booklet when you do the Camino in Spain to get stamps. When you enter Spain, and when you get all these stamps from different places like cafes and accommodations, that's when you get your certificate for saying you've completed the Camino. Um, but yeah, so there's it's the Camino Inglés, which is very I think it's from La Coruña on the coast or Ferrol, and so I didn't follow route. You can follow from northern Spain. You can do the Camino del Norte, which goes along Santander, Bilbao, Oviedo. But the most popular one seems to be the Camino Frances from the Spanish border.
So just to clarify, you say you went to Amiens, Paris, Chartres,
Mm.
presumably in that order, and then you went down to the Loire at where, Tours?
Yes, followed it. It didn't go quite as far as Nantes. I turned southwards to La Rochelle from Tours on the Loire River, and that's where I hit a fantastic weather system that
Okay.
was a blast. It's a refreshing blast of rain and wind for about a day, or 2 days actually, because I was camping and the campsite just got completely flooded. It was so bad actually that a lot of the large camper vans, were struggling to get out of their spots. So that was kind of a reality check in September that the weather can change suddenly.
And then from La Rochelle, did you just follow the Vélo d'Issée all the way down to the Spanish border?
I did it from La Rochelle. I headed south um, through I think it's called the Giroux.
The Gironde, yeah, the Gironde, yeah.
Yeah, the Gironde. Sorry, yeah, the Gironde. That's lots of surfing spots and quite a few lakes. But you do have to do a bit of a diversion to go inland um, around some of these lakes. And I took a ferry crossing as well, which was very dramatic. Um, yes, and then kept going south through lots of pinewood forests to Biarritz, and that's where I caught COVID for the first time. Actually, I hadn't managed to contract COVID at any point, and it's still a bit of a mystery how I got it, but I guess it doesn't really matter. But it meant I I was meant to have a R day or two in a fairly upscale hotel. Biarritz is quite a refined seaside resort of yesteryear. It's still fairly upscale now. So yeah, I ended up having to stay there for about 6 nights whilst I recovered from COVID.
Oh, God. So does I'm just rereading your email, and you've put 35 days of cycling.
Mm.
So how long did it actually take you in terms of the number of days that you were away?
It took 49 days. Yeah, because I took rests from about five. Well, I wanted it to be every 5 days, but I don't know what it's like with you. But sometimes you just you just want to crack on, you sometimes you just get into the moment of like, I want to do the mileage, or I want to get to a certain place, and you don't listen to your body sometimes. So I was taking breaks from every 5 days to maybe 7 days, and I suspect if I was to speculate, I'd say I was probably cycling for about 7 days, and my body probably just said you need a rest, and I would say that my um, I was a bit weak, and I probably opened myself up to being in a campsite cafe somewhere, and picking up getting someone's COVID or something like that.
So did you stay in the hotel in Biarritz for the 5 6 days while you were recovering?
Yeah, I had to. I was lucky that they didn't say no, we're all fully booked. It was kind of late September, um, early October, but I do remember the face of the proprietor when I told her I had COVID. She looked away, in like physically moved aback and in horror, and yeah, it was a very very strange. But she did explain to me that she'd already had COVID about 6 times, because she was at the front desk in a hotel. So every morning they put a breakfast on a tray for me, quite a nice French breakfast. And but it was intense. I don't know if you've had COVID, but it's the first time for me, and it was, no matter what I took, you just couldn't, you were just sweating. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't read a book. It was just staring at a ceiling, and um, trying to get deliveries of food to you. Thankfully, there was a few food apps around that I could get stuff delivered, like fruit and juices and replenishments and stuff like that. But it was pretty intense, I have to say. And I found out afterwards, and this might be a lesson for everyone who's ever gone abroad. I couldn't actually claim on my travel insurance for the cost of that holiday, of that the hotel stay, through medical reasons. It's because I didn't have a return ticket. So apparently, a lot of travel insurance companies, you need a return ticket. Now, I didn't have a return ticket back to the UK because I didn't know when I was going to get to Spain. I didn't want to give myself a deadline. So it cost me quite a bit of money to from my budget, because I only had a single ticket, which was the ferry, and I didn't read the small print of travel insurance. So there are backpacker insurance policies out there that allow you to not have to have it's not a requirement to have a return ticket. But that was after all these years on this planet and using travel insurance policies, that was the first time I was actually aware that you need a return ticket to claim on your policy.
Yeah, I mean, I always take insurance out when I've been anywhere, but I mean, the whole nature of going by bike is that usually you don't have a, because you started in one place and you finish in another, and you're only going to have a, one way journey at either end, unless you're doing a circular trip like I suppose I did back in 2022 from Hull to Rotterdam, and then go off cycling around Europe. But usually you don't have a return trip. But interesting. Anyway, right. So you've arrived at the Spanish border. Um, so Did you go into the Pyrenees to pick up um, the Camino de Santiago, the Camino Frances, or did you stay on the coast and head in the direction of Bilbao?
I actually cheated. So there was two parts of my route where um, I didn't purely cycle to my next destination, and one of them was when I cycled from Biarritz across to Spain via Bayonne. I got to San Sebastian and stayed there for a few days, and well, I was still kind of recovering from sort of 6 days of with COVID, and it was quite difficult. Well, it's very hilly there. It's still the foothills of the Pyrenees. So if you really wanted to start, I could have cycled from Biarritz up to the Saint Jean de Pied, but it was really steep. And if I'd have started from San Sebastian, I was going to cycle up to the border or to Pamplona. but again, they were really steep. And actually, I spoke to people subsequently who did start from those places, and they said it was the hardest part of the trip because they were so steep, the mountains climbing that they had to do. So in a way, I'm kind of glad I didn't do it. So, but the other problem is it's something you're not really aware of with trains and bicycles is you can't take your bike on these high-speed train services in Spain. They're very good, but you need to put them on in a box. And the trains from, say, San Sebastian to Pamplona weren't high speed, they were regional trains, and they were very restricted. There was like one or two spots available in in an entire train, and you had to book it. So, and it wasn't straightforward. It was a couple of hours to get what seemingly as the crow flies, it's not very far away, Pamplona to from San Sebastian. So I managed to get a regional train with another a person I met on the platform, a Spanish man who had just done a week cycling in doing the sort of Camino del Nortes, I think it is. Um, and we both conspired together to keep our bikes together against the conductor because there was potential that he would have said, "There's too many bikes on this train. You need to take it off." So we were trying to keep our heads down and make sure that we were not in the way when we clearly were, because there wasn't a specific space for bicycles on that train. It was more for like disabled access, I guess, or just a regular luggage spot. So that was, and even we spent, the next 2 hours just comparing notes about train travel and taking our bikes, and he was bemoaning how difficult it was to get from Madrid, where he lived, with his bicycle up to northern Spain. Um, so it's something that I'd never really thought about because when I have taken trains anywhere in England, it's usually you just sort of pop on on the train and you place your bike in a carriage that's got a designated space for a bike. Or if it's somewhere like Great Western, you have to book in advance, but they have specific spots for you. Um, so it's something I hadn't really thought about. I knew France was a bit complicated, and I actually had to use a train from Versailles to Chartres because it was really tipping it down all day, and that's those two parts are the only parts of my journey where I had to take a train and not cycle to my next destination.
Well, first of all, it's not cheating. It's officially not cheating because I did that with my 10 trains back in 2022 when I did my big tour around France and then into the Alps and down the Rhine. So it is now officially not cheating, even though before doing that journey I would probably say it is cheating, but it's officially now not cheating. And what I've found is that yes, you're going to have problems. I mean, in Germany, for example, the intercity trains in Germany, it's simply bikes are banned. The Eurostar is notoriously difficult. The TGVs in France, likewise in Spain, the high speed network. It's a real problematic thing to get your bike on there, especially a touring bike,
Hmm.
which you can't really dismantle and put in a bag. But I've always found that the regional trains, so in France, the TER, for example, and I would imagine it was the TER that you took from Versailles to Chartres. Um, they're very easy to use, lots of bicycle space. Um, and in Spain, because I cycled from Santander down to Porto a few years ago, and then I made my way back up to Santander mainly by train. And I found that I think they were called media distancia trains.
That rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were really good and they were really easy to use. I can't remember if there were restrictions on the number of people using them, but I never had a problem getting my bike on them, and I found they were really easy to use. And looking back, bearing in mind my experiences now of taking the train mainly in France, it was pretty similar in terms of ease of use. So, so perhaps I don't know. I mean, it might have been just that issue between San Sebastian and Pamplona. But then again, the chap that you were just talking about. He said he had issues, full stop. So perhaps it's more challenging than I imagine it to be.
Yeah, I think it's probably wise just to do your research in advance. and it's not always that simple of just rolling on. I mean, for example, that train journey from Versailles to Chartres, it was that service, but it was for you had to hang your bikes, so you had to hang them from the ceiling.
Yeah.
Now, if you're overladen with four pannier bags and it was chucking it down, so you're completely soaking wet, and it's a lot busier service, and people are just looking at you like you're sort of mad as you get on this bike and get on this train with your bike. It was a memorable journey. But yeah, I take your point in terms of it's not cheating. It's just, well, when I look at the map now, so I've actually gone to a sort of service to print out a poster of my journey using the GPX files, and you just see these gaps. And actually, the person who I ordered it from, he said, "Can you review this? Is this okay? Is this correct?" I'm like, "Yes, it's correct." Yeah, I just had these gaps between, but yeah, I don't regret not doing the cycle trip to Pamplona from San Sebastian, because by all accounts it's pretty difficult, and I was a bit worried myself after COVID that I didn't have the lung capacity at that point. I mean, as you know, with a lot of cycle touring, the first sort of few days you're on it on the bike, it's physically demanding. um, Fatigue hits in, but you do have to get your cycle legs, I think, and it does take a while. So I'd had 6 days off the bike. Well, not literally off the bike. I did go out on trips whilst I was recovering, just to get some air. But you do have to get your cycle legs in shape before you can do any kind of distance or any kind of climbs, at least.
I take on board the fact that you had COVID, but I think it's worth pointing out that when I came along the Camino de Santiago towards the French border, this is back in 2015, I was expecting it to get extremely steep and some arduous climbing as I headed in the direction of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. But actually, that was because I was using a walking map, and there were sections of the Santiago, the Camino, that you couldn't take on a bike, and I had to use the roads. And actually, the walking path went a lot higher than what the roads I had to follow, the paths I had to follow on the bike. So actually, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as I expected. And actually, from Saint Jean Pied de Port going down towards the coast at Bayonne, it was never that steep. I mean, obviously, I was going downhill, so it was easy for me. But even coming in the other direction, I don't think it would have been too tricky. But you'd just had COVID, so I think you probably made the right decision by taking the train down to San Sebastian. Um, so you then went to Pamplona, and you picked up the official route, presumably in Pamplona.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and yeah, you could. It was a real pilgrim city. It was lots of albergos and lots of people with backpacks walking around, and the symbol of the conch shell is kind of everywhere. It's a fantastic city anyway, um, for food, etc. And it's very well signposted around. You go through the University of Pamplona as a route, and then you just go. You pretty much outside the city. You're in this kind of like rolling hills of northern Spain. It's fantastic. Navarra, I think it is Navarra, and it's very well signposted after that point.
Were you surprised at the number of people who were actually there walking? Presumably there were a few cyclists as well, but were you surprised just how many people there were?
Um, no, I knew it was popular. I knew it was popular with walkers. I guess there was definitely more walkers nearer to obviously Santiago, so people would maybe do 100-mile Camino, but to start from Pamplona itself, no, I wasn't that surprised. And it was solo pilgrims. Then there was groups of 10, groups of 2, groups of 5. And I was so surprised. It was truly international. I mean, we met people that had done it from Poland. We had South Korean pilgrims. There were quite a large North American contingent, but all across Europe. And yeah, it was truly international. It wasn't just dominated by one nationality, I didn't think. And it was people. Some people, well, mostly people just had backpacks, and a lot of people had poles, I think, which was wise. Um, but not that many cyclists. No, I met a few in the first couple of days, but not as many as you'd think. Um, Mainly because it's probably seen as a kind of a walking route, Camino, rather than cycling.
So, is there a variation? Is there an official variation of the Camino de Santiago for cyclists?
You can follow the Camino for pilgrims. It does diverge. I think there is a velo route. It does diverge if you wanted to on a road. Um, I didn't. I don't think I diverged too much. Um, I There were some really rough bits that were. I'd say you'd probably want maybe a gravel bike, but to be honest, a touring bike did the job. Yes, it was rocky in parts. Some parts were. I don't know why I climbed up this huge hill. I actually had to walk up half of it. But for the most part, it was either on the exact same path as the walkers or completely adjacent to it. And for the most part, I just followed the signs for the Camino. I just followed that. I didn't. I was using Komoot, so the GPX file that I had that I was following was pre-planned, pre loaded into my Komoot app, and I just followed that. So the route generally, if you ever use sort of commute, it does tend to plot um, your routes for you using, I think it's open maps, and it tends to use, say if you're cycling, it will suggest to you cycle routes rather than the walking route, and that's where it diverged, where it didn't follow the Camino route because it wasn't a hiking route in Komoot. It followed the cycle routes, but sometimes I diverged because they were so close together, and sometimes the paths were a bit too rough, or maybe they were unknown. So we would follow the actual road path instead.
And did you find it an issue just with the number of people who were walking? Isn't it a bit like, cycling down a busy pedestrianised area in a town centre? Are you constantly dodging people, or was it a bit easier than that?
It's a good question. I'd love to know what other pilgrims thought in terms of the walkers. I never felt it was too congested. Yes, there could be groups of 10 people, 5 people across the path, but I had a bell and I just rang the bell. And the familiar salutation for everyone is Bon Camino. Everyone says that when they go past a pilgrim or when you meet them. So everyone just says that as a welcome to everyone else. We're all doing the same thing. We're aiming for the same destination, and that's the really nice thing about the Camino. I think is everyone's doing the same thing in different ways. Um, some people are a bit, some people are a bit nervous about cycling anyway, because you're going faster than them, and sometimes they may not hear you. So there may be a few glances of shock, or I definitely wondered what people thought of it. It was in the hostels themselves. There was always a slight sort of surprise that we were there, um, but not hostility. But there was kind of, I think, I do remember some people sort of looking at us like, I don't know. It'd be really fascinating to know what people thought of a cyclist doing it. It's like going back to the cheating term, but are you really doing the Camino unless you've walked it, unless you've done 3 weeks in these boots and gotten all the blisters and backache, and because it is physically. I mean, I think we the people we spoke to, they had their 20 kilometers that they did every day, and then they started off at the crack of dawn, and then they got there for like midday to grab their spot in the hostels, which had opened by that point, and then they would just rest up for the rest of the day, and then So it was. I always wondered what they thought of us, with all these, bags and cycling and maybe doing it the slightly easier way or not. I mean, my riposte would always be, "Hey, I've just cycled from Calais, so I've always done 1,000 miles or whatever." So, but yeah, there were some glances sometimes with surprised looks of, what's this person doing down the Camino route?
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting because as I said, the bit that I did was from Burgos. Yeah, I joined it just before Burgos, and then headed east to Pamplona, and then as far as Saint Jean Pied de Port.
Mm.
Um, and I was going against the flow. So I was all these. It amazed me the number of walkers that there were. It was more like a walking motorway rather than a path. Really surprised, and some sections where it was relatively rough, um, and I think there were a few people who did make the comment, "Hey, you're going in the wrong direction," which I did eventually find a bit frustrating. I remember one woman telling me in French, "Hey, you're going in the wrong direction," and I said, "No, I'm not, because I'm going to Trondheim, just to, or even further than that, just to kind of validate the reason why I was cycling against the flow of people."
Wow, that would have really frustrated me if you were just being corrected all the time. It's like, no, well, actually, we did meet some cyclists going the other way, and we knew they'd already done Santiago, so they'd already gone cycled there and were coming back because, why not? So it was a bit like, I remember doing the Dunwich Dynamo. I don't know if you know about Dunwich Dynamo. It's this kind of overnight ride, the full moon in July, from London to Dunwich in, I think it's Suffolk on the coast. And there's no rhyme or reason to doing it. It's just people do it. It's not a charity. It's not. There's no race. There's no winners medal. It's just people do it. Like thousands of people do it. But I remember going through the night, trying to get there overnight, and I think it must be about 2 or 3 in the morning, and we already met cyclists coming the other way. They'd already done it. These semi-pro sort of cycle club, lycra folk, and it always made me smile thinking, they'd already been there and were coming back. But yeah, it depends on the time of year as well. I mean, I guess mine was September, October, late September, early October. So it may have been less people doing it. Maybe people do it more in May. It was particularly hot in September and October. It was unusually dry actually in northern Spain at that time. But I definitely never felt it was congested. I never felt that I had to like really avoid people, like to get around them, etc. It was, it was not. Sometimes you could spend an hour and not see anyone on the route, and sometimes you'd see someone every 200 meters.
Now, in your email that you sent to me, and I hope you don't mind me quoting this, because presumably they will be, well, potentially listening. I suppose it depends if you tell them. But you've said in your email, um, but the real story isn't just the journey itself, it's the incredible group of people I met in the last week. A motley crew from all corners of the world, each with their own unique reasons for being there, and together we shared unforgettable moments. So, those people who you met, and I've got a picture of them, there's about 5, 6, 7 of them. Um, who were they, and how did you end up traveling, cycling with them?
Yeah, they were other cyclists, touring cyclists, who I met with about a week to go, to get to Santiago, and I met them in a hostel, albergo, which was more of a religious one, so there was actually nuns there, and they just stormed. I was already waiting to get registered in this kind of austere room, and they just came in, three of them. These One was a Dutch guy called Pim, and with lots of hair, and he had a guitar and a basketball on the back of his pannier bag. Then there was Max, who was from Mauritius, and he had this kind of like yellow bib that you get with working on a construction site, and he had this kind of oversized helmet, and he had quite, I'd say almost like a mountain bike on him, so it wasn't this kind of like geared up sort of person. Then we had David, who's from the United States, and he had all the kind of gear, quite flashy stuff, really nice bike, and they were just gabbling away with each other. So they really made an entrance, and I sort of sat there, and I'd recognised one of them. I'd recognised Pim because Pim had I'd gone past a really old church on about the day before, maybe 2 days before, very early, and it was this kind of ruined church complex, monastery, and I saw him in the corner of this kind of cloisters, sitting on this kind of makeshift altar and sort of just contemplating. He had his eyes closed. I just thought, God, what a funny kind of guy, sort of just sitting on his own, sort of contemplating and sort of dreaming. And then he sort of turned up at this albergue. Anyway, we all got chatting, and we all ended up having to share this bunk bed, two bunk bed room, and we all just got on. We were all doing the same journey, and then I guess maybe about a day later, we agreed to cycle together, to continue the journey. They had only met that day themselves, and were just been flying through the Camino part, and then we met Max and Ronya in a campsite. Well, it was an albergo, but they had a garden where we could camp. And it was Max and Ronya from Germany with I think it was their 2-year-old son in a trailer. And they were just casually doing the Camino. They've been traveling for a couple of weeks already. And yeah, they were just this really chilled out young lad. And they were a really chilled out couple, and just camping and enjoying their ride. And what was remarkable was just how relaxed the boy was. We ended up just all traveling together for the next week, and just really getting on with each other and doing some quite hard climbs. But what was remarkable, I thought, was just how chill out their son was. So basically, that trailer was like a cot. Once you put him in there, this darkened space, and the motion of the bike, the relaxed motion of the bike, was like a cot. And apparently he would just conk out. He would just go away into his sleep straight away. So anyway, we became quite well known. Apparently, I heard third hand on the Camino of like, hey, have you met this wild cycling group? It's almost like Scooby Doo or something, and of this kind of multinational, multiracial, multi-generational group, who look very different, but they have this child in this trailer on the end of their bike, and it was a great conversation starter. Like anywhere we stopped, we got people talking to us, and we all got on really well, and it was yeah, it was such a random thing to meet. Pim from Holland had cycled from the Netherlands, so he'd done a similar sort of journey to me, and Max had come over deliberately from Mauritius to do the Camino. I think he was Roman Catholic, so he had sort of more of I guess, a more spiritual reason to do it. David was African American, was living in Barcelona, but was a trauma therapist, and he had a practice and stuff, and he was quite into fitness and stuff like that, and was quite into cycling, and wanted to do this thing he had done it from Pamplona. And yeah, it was a really interesting mix of backgrounds and stories of why people had discovered the Camino as a route, and why they were actually going on the Camino itself.
Did you not find it a bit frustrating after having been on your own for many, many weeks, especially in that hotel room in Biarritz, albeit with COVID, then suddenly to have to kind of take into consideration the whims, the preferences, the opinions of 5 other adults and a 2-year-old kid?
The risk is, if you acquiesce to someone else's decision and something goes wrong, then there might be a bit of acrimony there. But for me personally, I was quite grateful for where we were going, at what distance had taken out of my hands. I did do about 2 days or 3 days maybe, with another guy. He was from another obscure part of the world. He's from the French island of, I think it's Réunion. and he ended up just going on his own after about 2 or 3 days because he was a little bit faster than me. He was carrying less. He was probably fitter than me actually. I think he used to play semi-professional tennis. He definitely was fitter than me, but so he just wanted to continue as fast as he could to Santiago, whereas I was like, I'm not, I'm not in a rush to get there. So for me, it was not a frustration. No, it was. Yeah, there were moments where I thought, um, I've got this route on my map. I'm going to follow this on Commute, and then they had their route, which was on a different app. Um, and it was like, okay, well, that's nice, but you're missing that bit, or that route looks like it's a bit hillier and stuff like that. So I just I resigned myself to being led by that point, I think, and I don't regret it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in northern Norway, and I met up with a German chap. I'm just trying to remember his name. His daughter was Veronique, and he was called, oh, I've forgotten. Anyway, they'd been cycling from Trondheim, I think, and I spent the last 3, 4, 5 days cycling with them, and it was just so nice after all the time, because I'd set off from southern Spain, so it had been quite a long time of cycling basically on my own and meeting other people along the way and having to repeat the same question and answer session over and over and over again. Whereas when I met up with them, after the initial exchange of where you're going, where have you come from, where do you live, etc., all the kind of the boring questions of life, it was nice just to meet them and occasionally cycle with them over those last 4 or 5 days and actually have meaningful conversation, which went beyond just, you know, where have you started from? Where are you going to? What's your bike like? How long have you had your bike? Have you done this before? It was possible to have real proper conversation. And at the end of the journey, that I really appreciated that opportunity to not have to repeat the same old conversation over and over and over again.
Yeah, I agree. That actually sounds very familiar to me. And we would stop at places and we would have a chat and quite deep conversations because you had the time really, especially in the evenings and over a cheap but very good bottle of Spanish red wine. And you would get into quite deep conversations. And even on the road, just cycling along, and people get into quite personal territory. One of the questions we would ask is like, not everyone asked it, but in our group, why are you doing it? And I didn't have a spiritual reasons. I felt slightly odd. I didn't have this profound spiritual journey to go to Santiago. I think part of it is because if you know the story of the Apostle of Saint James, his body was meant to be discovered there by a bishop in a long time ago. It was, there's definite dubious accounts of like clearly not the body of Saint James. It's kind of impossibility, and it was just a bit of a fraud to get people to get the pilgrims in because it's a bit of a money spinner for the local archbishop. So for me, it was always just like, well, yeah, it's this kind of medieval ploy to get pilgrims to come to your city. But despite that, the story of why people have been going there for you know many hundreds of years from all parts of the world, it for me was quite an interesting thing to take part in, to be a part of that legacy, I guess, of other people doing it. But yeah, some of the conversations that we had with people on the way, I met one guy who'd done, I think he'd done a Camino every year for the last 18 years. He'd done all of the Caminos, and I couldn't get an answer out of him why he was doing. He was in Northern Ireland, and I thought it might be, maybe as a religious background reason for it, because you did meet quite a few pilgrims from Roman Catholic majority countries, I guess, say Ireland or Poland or Italy or Spain, and there would be religious reasons. Um, but I guess for cyclists, I guess we weren't necessarily seen as pilgrims. I don't think. Maybe it was just cycling was a bit more of a cycle touring is slightly different to actually walking it. I think, say, cycling is seen as maybe not as difficult as actually walking it, and I would probably agree. I think some of the people we met on the route who were hobbling, people who had to bail with like 5 days to go after doing it's from Pamplona. So yeah, so we got into quite interesting conversations with people why they were doing it. Um, and it was good to get past the where are you from, how long you've been doing it, what's your reason for doing the Camino. Um, yeah, I also appreciate that sentiment that you could actually have some quite deep conversations with people, complete and utter strangers, and the only thing connecting you with it was the the bike. You know, as to paraphrase an infamous cyclist, it's all about the bike. And you know, what you're doing on a bike is, I think for cycle tourists, you kind of know, don't you? You sort of like you know what it's like, and you know the joys and freedoms of cycling on a touring bike. I think, but you also know the difficulties of it as well, which is namely climbs, and you're carrying too much, or saddle sores. You know, the sort of stuff that people don't want to talk about, or you know, it's the just the fatigue, or actually just the loneliness of doing long distance touring. It can be incredibly lonely. So actually being able to talk to people and actually discuss the problems they had. I remember the problems David had. He'd started from Pamplona and he just had a rucksack, I think. But it was like he was carrying way too much. After the first day, he got completely lost leaving Pamplona. He'd taken the wrong route somewhere, and he was just really struggling. And he was going up this hill, and he was like sweating, and he was just like, "This is what am I doing here?" And he basically just went to a post office in a small town and just put his entire backpack, most of it, into a box and just posted it back to Barcelona and sort of restarted the journey again. And it was those sorts of conversations I really enjoyed because it's not all about, you know, the amazing sights and the food and the camaraderie. It's about the things that go wrong,
Mm.
and the mistakes that you make and bouncing back from them and stuff like that. I really enjoyed the conversations with people where it didn't go quite as to plan.
You reminded me of when I was cycling from Seville again back in 2015, and I was following the Via de la Plata, which is one of the routes that goes eventually to Santiago de Compostela from the south of Spain. And I met a chap called Dirk, and he was a German cyclist. He was about the same age as me, and I met him 2 or 3 times, and I assumed he was everything about him suggested that he was a priest, and I convinced myself that he was a priest in the German church and or the Roman Catholic Church, and then I met him for the final time. I can't remember where it was, somewhere up along the Via de la Plata, and we went out for a drink. And I said to him, "What do you do for a living?" Fully expecting him to tell me he was a priest. And he said, "Oh, I'm a tabloid journalist." And it really shocked me because I thought, "Oh wow, um, that's completely at the other end of the spectrum to what I imagined you were doing." And his motivations for doing the cycle, he was intending getting as far as Santiago de Compostela, were completely different from what I imagined them to be. So yeah, you do meet some interesting people along the way. Um, are you still in contact with all these people?
Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group, and I was telling them that I was gonna maybe talk to you about the journey, and we're all planning to. Well, Max is still in Mauritius, but he comes back every 6 months. He's retired, and so we're trying to maybe do a trip where they come over to England, or there is there is talk. There's another Camino in Japan. I think it's called the 80 Temples Camino, and I think David is he's pretty ambitious, and he's talking about doing that. Either cycling, I think, or walking. I'm not sure. So there's loose talk of us all meeting up again. I mean, Pim is only in the Netherlands, so he's not far away. Ronya and Max are in the sort of western part of Germany, so they're pretty close. And David is in Barcelona 6 months of the year. So although literally he's just gone back, the sort of same sort of day I was in sort of Mallorca, he was in Barcelona, so we missed each other. So yeah, we're still in regular contact. In fact, the anniversary when I emailed you was a year to the day. So I messaged everyone to say happy anniversary, fellow pilgrims. And yeah, it's been quite. I think the really nice thing it was. Um, these moments you have where you meet people for a week, and you just get on really well, and you go through all these travails, and because we did have some one really bad journey going through the mountains and stuff. It was everyone feels the sort of same way. David mentioned that he was talking to someone on the flight back from Barcelona to DC, and he just tells people about the people he met on his Camino, what he did, and what his amazing experience it was. And he says he doesn't. There's not a week he goes by he hasn't told someone about this amazing trip that he did. And Pim is really grateful for it. And I had a phone call with Max in Mauritius, and he's on the beach, and his blue waters and stuff, and he was really pleased to hear from me. And yeah, it's just been I'm regular contact via Instagram with Max and Ronya, and seeing their little boy growing up, and boy did they grow fast. And it's just really nice to have that memory together that we all appreciate. It wasn't just some random one-off. It doesn't really matter. I think we can all appreciate what a cool trip it was, and it was great to meet everyone in that circumstance. Because we all got on.
Interesting that you should mention that 80 temples Camino
Mm.
in Japan, because I have read somewhere about that. I mean, I'm planning potentially. I haven't actually made a final decision yet, but I'd like to go to Japan. Well, I was planning to go there in 2020, but it never happened. And I'm still thinking perhaps next year of going and cycling in Japan. And I have come across the 80 Temples Camino. I'm just trying to remember where it gets mentioned, because I've read a few books about cycling or traveling in Japan. And that is definitely something that I've read about. How did you celebrate when you got to Santiago? Did you all go out for a wild night in the nightclubs of Santiago de Compostela?
Yes, and we took the wee boy with us. No, David had mechanical problems about maybe 2 days before, and he didn't want to hold us back, so he stayed back, got a hotel room, found a bike shop because it was on a Sunday. It was difficult, and managed to get his bike sorted. And so he joined us about maybe a day later. We all stayed in the same Airbnb, probably breaking some kind of rule about guests and stuff. And because I think David was on the couch, and it was just been raining for 2 days. Like we were cycling in the rain for about 3 days, I think, and it wouldn't stop when we got there. It just kept going. So we kind of holed ourselves up in this Airbnb in the center of Santiago, and we did go for a drink afterwards. But I think we were just quite knackered actually, and also, yeah, I don't know, maybe it was just slightly deflationary. I think the thing people don't talk about is, well, first of all, what we did was we got our certificate for completing the Camino. So we went to the sort of cathedral, and we went to the ceremony of, like a mass for pilgrims that I think they do every day. But there's this moment where the frankincense it's this massive container that swings from one end of the cathedral to the other. I mean, it's very dramatic, and it's I think so. We did that, and then afterwards, I think because of the rain, and we were just trying to keep dry, and it was incredibly wet place, Santiago. Um, it was a little bit deflationary because I think Max had just got rid of his bike, I think, or packed. He he packed it up with a bike shop there, and just literally got on the next um, flight out of there that he could. Um, and everyone else, when you get to Santiago, it's a bit of a strange place. It's quite difficult to get out of there with a bike, um, because there's no nearby ferry. The nearest one is Santander, and you can't get there by train because it's quite difficult. Getting your bike on there with the pannier racks and bags, and flying is difficult because you have to figure out, well, how do I get my stuff on the plane? And even Ronya and Max trying to get back to Germany was not easy to try and get a train out of there with bikes. So we were all struggling we spent a couple of days just trying to figure out how the heck do we actually leave Santiago. And so we all just, I think most of us resolved on getting it boxed up with this bicycle shop in Santiago. Very reasonable, actually. They do it all for you. They take your bike apart and put it in a box, and you collect it, and they drive you to the airport, which is amazing. And actually, the guy who owns the shop, he's an ex-pro cyclist. He's done, I think he did two tours of the Tour de France with the team back in the early 90s, I think, and a couple of other tours. And he was really nice, and so it's a regular thing for him to do, I think. So it's something to bear in mind, actually, if people are wanting to do the Caminos, figure out how you get out of there, particularly if if you've got a deadline to get back to your home country. Him actually continued on to all the way down to Porto, I think, which is my plan. But I think by that point I was pretty tired and was wetted out, I think. And yeah, I think after a few days in the Airbnb, everyone sort of went their own separate ways. So there wasn't there wasn't a massive fiesta or party, but we did spend a good few days in Santiago. There's lots of stuff to see. The food's fantastic, but it was incredibly wet because it was by that point sort of mid to late October.
And looking back finally on the entire trip, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, I was really pleased by the route I took. Um, Probably, yeah, I might have gone a bit earlier, but I think the time I went was pretty good as well. I wish I had gone to the frontier, I guess. I wish I had started from, to say I've actually done the Camino de Frances, to say you've actually done that route. Um, I wish maybe I had continued on to Lisbon and Porto. Um, one thing I would say, and this is probably going to sound very familiar to anyone who listens to your podcast, I think I probably would have taken less stuff, and I thought I was pretty good at the stuff like that. But I actually took a chair with me, like it was just one of these lightweight camping chairs, and it was useful. Like, and you're not sat on a saddle all day. You wanted somewhere to sit and not crouch. But I took an AeroPress with me. I took coffee with me. Stuff that, I mean, I think I used the AeroPress coffee maker, I think maybe 5 times. Um, I think I would have just taken less stuff because going up some of those mountains, there's one particular day where I think it was the hardest day cycling I've ever done in my life. It was pushing the bike up for miles, and it was, drizzle. So I think be pretty brutal. I know it's difficult, particularly the time of year I was going. It was still summer-ish, it's still summer weather, especially the further south you go, and you have to take into account temperatures changing, wet weather, and doing stuff off on your days off. But I still took way too much stuff, and I really felt it on some of those hills. I just thought it was stupid, and it was also just unmanageable. It's the little small things where you're. I mean, I don't know if this is like this for anyone else touring, but I just took forever to decamp. Take off everything, get my tent set up, and vice versa. It kept happening every time I left. It used to take me like 2 hours to leave from getting up, from having something to eat, having a shower, ablutions, and getting rid of packing things away in the correct way. It could take forever, and I was always astounded by that, by how long it took to pack up. And I never got the secret of it. So I'd say just carry less stuff. That's what I would do differently.
Yeah, I have to say, taking a chair, I've got a great little chair. It's called and a light mayfly chair, and it's brilliant. It's so light and it's so comfortable. In fact, I used it. The last time I used it was staying, not when I was camping, but when I was in the youth hostel in Lerwick earlier this year, and I set it up in the middle of the room and watched the TV in the in the dorm room that I was staying in because it was so comfortable. So definitely take a chair with you because I think that is such a nice thing to do, to sit down at the end of the day. And as for the coffee machine, yeah, I'd still take the coffee machine because the ability to make that coffee in the morning, even if even if you just head off down to a local cafe more often than making your own coffee, it gives you the option, should you be stuck on the top of a hill or something, to at least start the day with a coffee.
I have to say, it was nice to be able to make my own coffee, especially on random campsites. But I just didn't use it enough. And I think it's because I wasn't really in the middle of nowhere. Often there was always somewhere, like a somewhere to get somewhere. But I just think, well, when you're sweating buckets going up a hill, you do wonder why you've taken some things with you and didn't take the ultra light route that bike packers do or other tourists do doing worldwide trips. I'm sure there's I think extremes of milligrams, etc., is not the way I want to go. But yeah, I just think there were quite traumatic times going up some mountains with the bike with the amount of stuff I had in the pannier bags.
At least you didn't take a basketball.
Yeah, I don't think he even played that guitar. Do you know what he did do? He did pump up the ball, and in the square, the piazza outside the cathedral in Santiago, he did. I've got some great shots of him playing basketball in the square. It looks slightly mad, but yeah, to actually carry that all the way from, I think he started from somewhere in Utrecht or something like that, to carry it all that way, because he was a really interesting guy. He was a drummer and a basketball, like really into basketball and stuff. And yeah, it just took as much as but he was always really faster than me, and he was much fitter and stuff, so it didn't really matter. I think going back to the point of carrying too much, I think it was probably a fitness thing majority of the time, rather than my own weight, rather than the weight that was on the actual bike.
When this gets published, none of the shenanigans of actually recording this podcast will hopefully be audible because, dear listener, we've just had a bit of a nightmare trying to record this damn thing. Um, but when it all gets pieced together, it'll sound seamless.
Yeah.
I hope. I hope.
Well, maybe it will sound more fun if it's got all uh, the spluttering and stuff. But yeah, apologies. I think it probably is an internet thing.
Yeah, although my swearing might not pass the censor, I don't
No,
think.
I quite liked it. It was very. I was not expecting that. It was good. It was a good effing and jeffing.
Right. So thank you for telling your story. And any plans for any future journeys?
I was hoping to do another one in September, to go down to Rome, but I was in Colombia for 6 months and as part of my sabbatical, and I broke my leg. It's mountain biking for the first time in mid-August. So I'm still hobbling now. I mean, I've got the boot off, and I had to come back to the UK, so I wasn't able to do any kind of exercise for about 8 weeks. So I was hoping to do like a last dash, late summer, early autumn dash down to Rome or something like that. But yeah, nothing at this stage. I'm actually looking at Japan actually for maybe Easter, because I know it's quite far away, and actually the currency exchange is really good at the moment for Japan, and the 80 temple stuff sounds very intriguing. I'm going to do some research on that. But yeah, nothing at the moment. But I've just done you know recent trip and been cycling, so yeah, nothing booked in, but I do want to get something booked in because uh, maybe John O'Groats to Land's End. I don't know how long that takes, but something. I feel like once you do one of these long distance ones, I don't know how you felt when you first did it, but I think it's it tells you what you're capable of and what your bike is capable of, and it opens up things a lot more than before you'd ever done a long distance tour. So the the horizons are much larger, I think, once you've done your first big tour.
And on that note, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
So that has been episode 85 of the Cycling Europe podcast. Thank you to Johnny Murtagh for getting in contact and agreeing to record at such relatively short notice. There was a reference there at the end to the internet issues that we experienced earlier today, and if you keep listening beyond Rob Ainsley's music, thank you Rob as usual for providing the music, you may hear something that I've never done before, an outtake suitably bleeped, which will give you an idea of the issues that we had. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get in contact with the podcast yourself, then email podcast@cyclingeurope.org. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can find all the details as to how to do that by visiting cyclingeurope.org/support. So I'm back in the position of not knowing what will be in episode 86. It could be you, if you do like Johnny did, and get in contact. So thank you for listening, happy cycling, and don't forget to keep listening until after the music finishes. Again, thinking back to my own experiences of 2015, because I cycled north from Seville and I followed the Via de la Plata, which is one of the routes that eventually ends up at Santiago de Compostela.
Yeah, sounds like the sound has gone again on your end. Yeah.
Did you hear me swear? Can you hear me now?
I'm going to keep talking in case you can hear. I think you probably can hear me, but I can't hear you.
I can hear you,
Yeah,
but
it's
if you
just really
can't hear
frustrating.
me, then
Oh my God. I really hope it's not my end. I mean, I'm going to blame it on the weather, but because it's grey and overcast.
this is so frustrating.
You'll be pleased to know that your audio has dropped as well. I think I've jinxed your podcast, Andrew.
Phew, got to the end.